Thank you. Okay. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Eunjin Kim. I'm a PhD candidate at Penn State University in the United States.
Hi, my name is Münire Burçak Gezeroğlu, and I'm from Turkey, and I'm also a PhD candidate in the art education program at the Pennsylvania State University. And today we're going to present our ongoing digital storytelling project in an augmented reality program, Adobe Airo. This is a project that emerged from our need to visualize the many conversations we have had regarding our experiences in academia in the United States. As cohorts and friends, we have been sharing our struggles and supporting each other throughout our experiences in our doctoral program. This ongoing digital storytelling project provided us a space to reconceptualize our lived realities using a digital language.
Before we explain further about our digital storytelling project, we want to contemplate on our positionalities.
Reflecting on, interrogating, and conveying one's positionality related to the research orientation becomes critical to ensure the validity of the research stance. Reflecting on researcher positionality becomes important to ethically, intentionally, and mindfully attend to our roles in the research. We think that we perhaps had the privilege of not having much thoughts about our positionalities regarding our racial identities before coming to the US. We thought of positionality more in terms of a fixed identity, being Turkish/Korean, woman, artist/teacher, middle class, abled, and so on. From the visa application processes and the ethnic and racial demographic designation forms in school applications to the academic discussions in classes, ever since we came to the US, we became more and more familiarized with the term. As international students who entered into the US class and racial system, we underwent what American sociologist Herbert Gans defines as, quote, self-racialization, which is an emotive reaction to the ways in which immigrants react to the way a country's system racializes them. So in our conversations in these past years, we have been sharing and reflecting on how our positionalities have been shifting and how we have been experiencing it firsthand. In some ways, we feel as if we are still outsiders to the culture, but at the same time, we are insiders in the ways in which we have created our daily routines.
Through the project, we had more chances to think about fluidity and the in-betweenness of our identities. The dislocation from places where we hold our citizenships, Korea and Turkey, for a while during our journey as doctoral students in the US, blurred our belongingness to our own countries. We hear less about social issues back in our countries and read and hear more about what happens in the US. Nonetheless, being a foreigner, not having the citizenships of the US, prevents us from having the rights to vote, travel, or apply for jobs without worrying about visa situations. We felt as if we were stuck in the in-between space, finding it difficult to find place where we belong to. Experiencing the in-betweenness allowed us to look back into our identities and how our experiences as international doctoral students shape our identities.
For our project, we chose to work with Adobe Airo, which is an augmented reality authoring and publishing tool by Adobe on Creative Cloud. It allows anyone to view and interact with augmented reality experiences made with Airo and shared through an Airo link. Using an augmented reality allowed the ubiquitous embodiment of multi-layered elements. Using this technology allowed us to move and layer the elements throughout physical spaces, allowing us to carry and lay out our created meanings to the spaces that enabled such meanings. It also lets us go beyond the traditional understandings of collage making, where entities are often fixed and stable. It allowed us to incorporate multimodality into the digital storytelling using collage with sounds and animations. The process of constantly adding, responding, and layering the elements in our collage enacted a process in which the entanglement of our subjectivities constantly produced and reproduced boundaries and exclusions. This process allowed us to see the relationality of our subjectivities that both separated and brought together our living experiences in our doctoral education.
Our project began and developed through our weekly meeting where we shared our emotions, academic difficulties, memos from readings, drawings, videos, and sounds that reflected our lived experiences in academia and the small college town we have been living in. We set up a shared journal in a digital format using an app called GoodNotes. This shared journal became the primary source for our digital storytelling collage work. In our conversations, we delved into how the multiplicity of our identities has been shifting from the point when we started the PhD program. We also reflected upon how living through the pandemic has affected how we situate ourselves in the US. Moreover, we discussed the issues of white Eurocentric practices that persist in higher education, such as standardized academic language requirements and the lack of scholars of color in the field.
Keeping a shared journal started from our need to express our emotions and struggles in a raw way. Ever since PhD, we have not written much freely without thinking about the language rules. So keeping this journal was important in the way that it provided us a space to express ourselves without any filter. We found a common space that brought our similarities and differences in an authentic way. Our shared journal begins with our struggles concerning our shifting identities since we moved to the US. We talk about how we feel as if we are constantly in an in-between state regarding our PhD selves and our identities back in our home countries. Expressing ourselves in English and academic environment created a subjectivity for us in which we started to feel more self-conscious about what others are thinking of us, especially of our intellectuality in terms of the ways in which they use the language. Our journal continues with how we can and cannot deal with the academic and peer pressures and the burnt out feelings that come with overworking ourselves. For us, these feelings duplicated with the start of the pandemic, which hit us in the second half of our first year.
Also, the creative art making process helped us relieve our stress and anxiety. The art making process led us to be creative, trying out several art forms such as graphic novel drawing, GPS drawing, and digital drawings using Procreate. We experienced the power of art, which became the practice of healing for us. The art making process relieved some of our academic stress, stepping aside from all the readings, writings, and to-do lists. Looking for creative art making stimulated our mentality and spirituality. As a way to speak out about issues that we experience in the academia, we conducted a collaborative digital storytelling through collage making. In addition, we found it essential to address complex and dynamic sets of circumstances that international students experience. Firstly, the problems that we point out is the language rules as gatekeepers. Many researchers dealt with multilingualism, inequalities, and hegemony in academia. The language rules in central academia reproduce the existing power dynamics in academia, allowing the scholars in the community of central academia to be in leading positions of knowledge constructions.
As discussed by Jong-Yong Lee, quote, "There is little research that specifically focuses on international students' experiences since they are viewed as temporary residents who will leave this country when they graduate from school. Furthermore, it is generally considered that it is international students who have to be responsible for adapting to this new society by learning language and cultural norms as soon as possible," end of quote. Accordingly, to talk from our perspective, we have been feeling the pressure of academic expectations that are imposed on any graduate level student by academia. The intensity of these pressures become layered based on the backgrounds of the students. For example, as cohorts, we relate in the ways in which we express our thoughts in a decent academic language and academic environments to avoid being seen as if we are incapable of conducting intellectual conversations. So observing and reflecting on the academic struggles that we have been encountering over the almost 4 years, we find ourselves relating to one another through the ways academia marginalizes us due to its conception of academic usage of English. These instances are often abstract and do not only come from cohorts, academic advisors, or committee members themselves, but also from the technological tools that accompany our academic journey. This, like the spelling and grammar checking from Word, Grammarly, or academic writing center guidelines, and so on.
The second aspect that we found as a factor of the power dynamic in academia is promoting diversity as an action of tokenism. When walking around the Penn State University Park campus, the majority of people are white. However, they promote diversity and inclusion so much that it's hard to realize that it is still a predominantly white university. While the intention behind diversity and inclusion is great, we feel as if we are a token for letting others know that this campus cares so much about diversity.
As much as we feel comfortable in the campus, when we go out of and go to downtown or the neighboring neighborhood towns, we feel as if we went out of a politically correct bubble. Sometimes short encounters with locals when we are running our errands or just shopping or hanging out can turn into small talks about where we are from, or if it goes further, about whether we are thinking of staying in the US after graduating. These encounters can include behavior that we have to interpret and then make a decision about whether and how to react to it. Lastly, we would like to discuss politics of naming and its implications through our project. American names have been widely used and favored among international students in the US to not deal with the mispronunciation of their birth names. International students' names are often mispronounced, and this experience can have psychological and relational implications for some students' cross-cultural adjustment. In my experience in the past, I have dealt with the mispronunciation of my name almost on a daily basis while studying abroad. Burqa was the most common one that I was called as. And since burqa sounds so similar to burqa, which is a form of covering in Islam, being called as such directly offended me in terms of being stereotyped as a woman coming from a country where Muslims are a majority. Starting the PhD, despite my initial correction, being constantly called burqa again by a professor in a class I took in my first year was not pleasant, since this was a professional environment. I have also faced not being called as anything, since people were afraid of mispronouncements so much that they would not pronounce my name at all and instead refer to me as this person or as someone. And even though most of the time mispronunciations are unintentional and benign, nonetheless, it plays a huge role on the sense of belonging to a new culture from the student's part.
We view the way that we are constantly called out differently as microaggression. Huber and Solorzano define microaggressions as a form of systemic, everyday racism used to keep those at the racial margins in their place. They are the assaults based on race and its intersections with gender, class, language, immigration status, phenotype, accent, or surname. Pierce explains that microaggressions are only micro in name, but occurs frequently over time, imposing immense harm on victims. Therefore, the term micro does not minimize the impact of microaggressions, but alludes to their everyday and often private nature. In order to understand our project with theoretical lenses, we used critical race theory and Karen Barad's relational ontology and cutting together apart. Through looking at the problems related to the power dynamics of academia that we encountered through critical race theory, we wanted to create a platform to speak out about our racialized experiences. Critical race theory examines how race, racism, and power are interconnected. We look into the intersectionality of identities and how diversified identities of gender, sexuality, class, religion, language, and race could potentially overlap and conflict with one another. We foreground race and racism in understanding systemic inequality throughout the project. In our project, as we implement the counter storytelling, a methodological practice associated with CRT, we try to document our experiences as two international students and stay alongside to support each other. Furthermore, as we go further down the road with our collaborative digital storytelling project, we aim to invite others to share their stories through the project platform that we created.
Another theoretical viewpoint we experimented with is Karen Barad's concept of cutting together apart. Barat puts forward a relational ontology for their theory of agential realism. Relational ontology, as opposed to an individualistic one, acknowledges a basic condition. We are related to other people, to the world around us, to nature, our society and political systems, our friends, our family, and ourselves. In a way, relations between entities are ontologically more fundamental than the entities themselves. In other words, practices rather than the entities are the primary unit of reality. For individual objects and subjectivities to emerge in these relations, apparatuses, which Barat defines as material discursive boundary-making practices, have to enact cuts in them. These cuts separate some things and simultaneously connect others, because in a relational ontology, relations are always what Barat describes as cutting together apart. Our understandings of digital storytelling using collage was informed by such conceptions. The method of collage making as an apparatus enacted cuts in which our subjectivities emerged. In our digital storytelling collage, we have been emphasizing the ways in which we feel torn apart as international students in academia by the expectations placed on us by our families, friends, society, and by ourselves. So the cutting together apart the pieces of our subjectivities in and out of academia patchworked together new selves and beings.
So can I ask you to wrap up?
Yes, so we have a video we'll be showing about in 1 minute of our project.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That'd be the end of our presentation.